Hey, everybody, it's Marcella here. I am so excited to be talking to an old friend of mine, Erin Reese. She is the host of the Truth and Consciousness podcast on Substack, which I will say you must listen to. If you are a student of truth, if you are a student of consciousness, Erin, I'm not blowing smoke up your butt, darling, but Erin truly is one of the wisest women I am tracking and listening to today. Erin, you wrote this. Yeah, I know. No, really,
Thank
really.
you. I
Yes.
appreciate that.
When we were email exchanging, um, a little while ago, you wrote, you are straddling the worlds between using astrology as a portal for guidance and expression in day-to-day living alongside my truest love of the non-dual wisdom teachings. And I thought that was a perfect description of who you are and what you're up to.
Hmm.
So we are going to read my astrology chart. Is that right?
We are going to look at your astrology chart from a couple of different angles. And I'd love to mention something about that sentence that you just read,
Yes,
because
please
when
do.
you're preparing for this, I also saw that sentence that I wrote, using astrology as a portal, supporting my deepest love of the non-dual perennial wisdom teachings. Now, when we're talking about the non-dual, there really isn't a whole lot to say. So somebody needs something to say about the daily living.
That's perfect.
Right. So for a creative person, it's crickets. So I've been studying astrology and using astrology and tarot for probably about 35 years. I grew up with it in my household, and astrology, and I'll, referencing tarot as well. Astrology is something that we use in daily living. How do we function in duality? How do we function in the here and now? And it's also, if we look at an astrology chart, which is how I process the information to provide the new moon and the full moon channeled teachings, because I call myself an astro-intuitive. When we look at an astrology chart, it's really a clock. It's a clock. It's a calendar. It's a calendar that some of us have the ability to read. And it's also working, astrology is working with the archetypes, the universal archetypes, as many of your listeners will already know.
Yeah.
So it's working with the archetypal language, and it's also looking at a snapshot in time and space. A snapshot in time and space. Now, from a non-dual perspective, it's always now. There's nowhere to go, and there's nothing to do, which is quite funny because astrology seems like we're looking at the future. It's giving us a glance, like we would look at our calendar, of what we might expect to see unfold.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it assists us
Hmm. That's
in
great.
tapping into the present time energies to see where the wave of our life, the wave of the ocean of our individual soul, where it seems to be going, so that we can hopefully relax more and enjoy more in the daily living.
Relax more, enjoy more.
Even when it's hard.
Yeah, and also garner more wisdom, like uncover the innate. Well,
Oops,
that
that's my window.
who's what,
The,
who?
the wind, the
Oh,
wind.
oh,
Yeah, let
that's
me
funny.
get that. Let me get that.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. You were saying?
That, okay, so you're talking about a clock and you're talking about a calendar, this
Mm-hmm.
astrological system and the astrological teachings.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about the unfolding of events in time, but
And space.
and space, but you're placing that in the context of non-dual wisdom, which tell me if I've got this right, like no past, no future, no this, no that, but you're talking about now, like the now. So it's unfolding in, like in the Buddhist teachings, we talk about the fourth moment, it's
Mm-hmm.
unfolding in nowness.
Correct.
Okay,
Right, because if I was talking about putting astrology into the non-dual, there wouldn't be anything to say. There's nothing to say about it. There's a collapse of time and space into that fourth moment. So there's only the tip of the pen, and now that's gone. So we have nothing to say.
interesting.
The reason I'm bringing it up is that one of my primary interests and my roles is as a non-dual teacher. And for a long time, I would talk to my teacher about why would I even continue to use these tools? Astrology, tarot, therapy, spiritual counseling. And he looked at me and he said, "You can help a lot of people."
Oh, yeah. Well, hell yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I thought, okay, I guess, even if we see that we have no idea what's really coming down the pipeline, and that's the ultimate reality, is that only don't know. If we can keep that only don't know as the ultimate scaffolding,
Mm,
then we can still use what's given to us to make the most of our daily existence. But we are much more relaxed about it. So that's the only overlap that I see here. They don't really influence each other. There's nothing to integrate between astrology and the non-dual.
mhm.
Astrology is definitely a tool in duality and in daily living, and it's very useful.
Which the duality of daily living is what like we would call the working basis. It's the, we can't just spiritually bypass the day-to-day life and go into like, oh, I'm in non-dual bliss, ananda. Woo.
Correct.
Oh no, we can't do,
Yes,
like we have to pay the bills and we have to buy toilet paper and we have to, you know, take care of, feed the cats or whatever, relate to life. So we relate to life on life's terms. So maybe that's the portal piece of astrology,
exactly. And you,
what you're doing.
right, exactly. It's that intersection. And it is interesting, and we'll see as we pull up your own chart, that there are parts of a chart that can indicate a person's draw into the non-dual space, which is basically oneness.
Mm,
That's exemplified by the 12th house,
yeah.
okay, everything dissolving,
The
or
ocean.
the planet Neptune. So I'm going to pull up your chart, and this is an example for our listeners or our viewers, just to see what it looks like to look at one of these clock maps, okay?
Mhm.
And to see as an intuitive person, as an artist, as an intuitive artist person, I'm not coming from it from a book, even though there are many, many books that I studied and reference once in a while. Hopefully in my podcasts, my articles and things like that, you'll hear an aliveness where something is
Absolutely.
right, presencing, how is this today? Not where it's coming from here, not from my head, but from my entire full oceanic awareness.
Oh, I love this. So actually, apropos of that, your podcast, I was listening to it again. I listen to it often. I was just listening to a couple, I was catching up on it. And the flow of your delivery
Mm,
is so cohesive and smooth. Yeah, this is my experience as a listener. And
mhm.
again, I just want to say, I really do think the wisdom that comes through, I was listening to it and thinking, oh, she's channeling. Yeah. I was like, damn, she's channeling that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was
I
beautiful. I thought, oh, this can only, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I really appreciate you recognizing that, and I have heard that from other listeners. And what's interesting is that it can take me days or weeks to prepare for this 15 to 25-minute podcast that I'm putting out. But guess what? I'm not doing it from studying things. I'm not doing it from researching the chart. I will look at the chart and then I will listen. I will pay attention and I will feel. I will feel. I will use all of my senses, all 6 senses,
Mm.
and pay attention to what's being shown. And how, yeah, primarily it's an embodied experience.
That comes
And
through.
that is actually the hardest work. It's extremely difficult work. I
Well,
have
it's
to say,
like
I would like to just say, "Oh, it's easy." No, it's not. Because if you truly are an empath
Mhm.
and a physical empath, guess what? I have to feel it. I have to feel the struggle that's going on for the collective.
Well, and that certainly came through in the one of the more recent ones that you did. I think the new moon, the full moon in Capricorn,
Mhm.
that last week, it was like that was what day was that?
21st.
July 21st, and it was the day after the assassination attempt on Trump. And it was, I mean, like, and what you said in that, what you said was so, it was like an arrow hitting a bullseye about how we could relate to world events through the point of view of the full moon in Capricorn without any kind of partisanship, this or that, non-dual.
Very important for me.
Yeah,
Very
non-dual. It wasn't
important.
like yay or nay or this or that, or but clearly that major event coincided with this major astrological event, where things are being shaken at the core and structures are being challenged, and authority is the word of the day and all of this. So I mean, I was listening to it like, holy cow, this is like channeled prophecy prediction stuff.
Mm. That what you're referring to was the Mars conjunct Uranus, which did
Well, that
happen
was the week
a
before,
day.
right?
I put that out the day or two before the Trump assassination attempt, and that was the explosion energy and the
Oh,
surprise and the dislodging, the bullshit energy. The January or the sorry, July 21st full moon, which we just had a few days ago, was the day after Joe Biden announced that he was stepping down from running in the candidacy for the president this year. So
uh-huh.
that was another timing event, and that had to do with power.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
can.
that full moon in Capricorn, it was about power and uses of power, and how we need to be aware of when we need to change and to be clear on that personally. And as you know, in almost every forecast or podcast, if you listen to them, I always say to withdraw the projection onto the world as to what's out there. We are not victims. What's out there in terms of the political scheme, the wars, the COVID, whatever that is, and to focus on ourselves and do the work internally,
Yeah.
because that's where the real influence is. And that's sounds really cliche at this point. I know most of us have heard that, but it is the very difficult work. And it's really the only work that makes a bit of difference at this moment is the work that we do to examine our own shadow, our own relationship to power.
Mhm. Yes. So like Caroline Myss talks about this as calling your spirit home, back from the people, places, and situations it has wandered off into. And literally, like for myself, I know if I spend too much time going down the cell phone rabbit holes, like there's literally a leakage of energy,
Mhm, mhm.
like a draining.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So speaking of calling my spirit home or pulling myself back from the projections, one of my favorite practices is turn off the cell phone, turn off all the technology, and turn off the router, like power down. And it's remarkable how the world changes when we step out of it, and
That's very
out
true.
of the technological, kind of like the virtual reality, what we, there's what we see and read and scroll and all of that. But then there's the actual truth of the five senses of like, okay, what's right in front of me? What is
Mhm.
what is this world right here, right now, versus that kind of,
Exactly.
yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah,
And sometimes I feel like personally, I continue to use astrology uh, because we are connected to the collective, whether we like it or not. Even if I attempted to live in a cave, even if I wanted to live in the ashram, even if I've set up my home to be sort of like an ashram, I am still impacted by what is going on in the collective. And so that's for me personally why I continue to look at the charts of the full and the new moon. And the moon is rules the public. So it's a really good indicator of what's going on in the zeitgeist.
okay,
And then what happens for me personally and why I share it is that it makes me feel less crazy
yeah,
because, yeah, exactly. If I'm feeling off, but everything in my own space, my here and now, because my entire life is practice, my entire life is my devotion. You know, I'm working 24/7 to stay aware of the balance and the imbalance. That's what happens when you're that sensitive.
yeah.
So when something's off and you've checked your personal relationships, and you're still feeling this heaviness or this depression or anger or volatility, then I can say, okay, perhaps this isn't mine personally. Perhaps this is what's going on in the collective. And again, not to point fingers, but just to see what's impacting here.
Hmm.
And then I can say, what can I do about it? And you know what's interesting, Marcella, is that and I've thought about not doing astrology so many times over the last 30 something years. I've always wanted to stop, and I either get a dream or something that says it's keep going. Do you know what's interesting? That the minute that I put out a post, an article, or a podcast, I feel better. Why? Guess probably because I've named it. I've named the truth or a truth. I've named the reality to the best of my ability.
Hmm.
And it releases something. It releases something. So that's just part of doing one's dharma, I think. It's kind of like I'm not off the hook until I've done my part, I
Hmm.
thought.
Yeah, good. Bravo. Yep. Well, and the naming itself is the portal
Uh-huh.
into the vastness, into the non-dual. It's the portal
Hmm.
we cross
Hmm.
through. Okay, we've named it, and yet at the
Right.
same time, it's not the name. It's more than the name. It is the name, and then it's beyond the name. But to get beyond the name, you have to go through the name. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense to me. And that's why, I work with teaching Advaita, non-duality, but I also work with Tantra. So it's the
Oh,
duality and the non-duality. So for me, astrology is part of the tantric realm.
oh wow, that sounds like a whole other conversation. Like that's part two.
Embodiment. It's very important for me to represent that as a non-dual quote teacher, because otherwise, again, we're talking heads, which is fine, but you're only getting one part of the story. What about bringing it down and in
Yeah, and through
and through?
and
Right.
through. Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful. Well,
So I'm
should
going to
we?
pull up your chart just to show an example of how I look at things. And this might be um, news. Can you see this?
There it is.
Okay, let's
There it
see.
is.
There it is. Let me see if I
I
can.
know
Okay,
that chart.
you
I
know this chart. This is
oh
you. And I've taken away the birth data, so forth, so we keep anonymity. But this is Marcella, everybody.
well, this is my astrological configuration.
Yes, yes, yes. This is your baby picture.
Awesome.
So can you see my mouse?
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I just want to share a couple things that your listeners or viewers might find interesting. I work intuitively. I'm like, okay, what is the most interesting thing that pops out given all of my knowledge here? Now, the outside in the green is the transits. This is what's happening now. Again, we're talking about a clock. And the inner here with the pieces of pie, this is the static chart of her birth. Okay. Now, the first thing that pops out to me, because Marcella is a Leo rising over here, we see the sign of Leo. Her chart ruler is the sun. The sun rules Leo. So wherever her sun is going to make a very significant uh, splash in her life and whatever's happening to her son. Now, her son, which shines like the kitty cat, shines like the lion, shines, is in her ninth house. And it's in a very positive position. It's trine in early Aries, it's trine her rising sign. It's also in a sextile to her south node here, a wide sextile, but needless to say, the blue lines are easy. Red lines are a little bit more challenging or giving us some opportunities, okay? So I see that Marcella, in her sun in the ninth house, she's going to be happiest working with issues of the ninth house, which are, I also have a ninth house sun. Imagine that. Teaching, traveling, the exotic, more professorial. Did you want to say something, Marcella? Okay, yeah. So she's a ninth house expressive person publicly.
Mm.
And even though the ninth house can also be very inward because it needs all that time to digest it, but I could see with her Venus up here on her midheaven too, that she's going to thrive being probably a spiritual teacher or a writer, something like this.
Mm.
Now, so I
Or
see
being
that
the founder of the Women Food and Forgiveness Academy.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that was
Feminine
always going to be.
great. Funny.
Yes. So you're doing it. You're doing your dharma, so to speak. Now, the next thing that I see here is the transit of Neptune. We just talked about Neptune. See this little outside here is in Pisces, but it's coming up to conjunct your sun. Neptune moves very slow. Okay. And that stood out to me immediately. I've had Neptune on my sun in the past. My sun is in Aquarius. So think about dissolving. Think about the non-dual. Think about the spiritual life full on. That is coming into stark relief for you. It's going into to be coming very close next summer, but between spring of 2026, then all through 2027, it's going to be passing over your sun. And why I would tell you that, Marcella, is that I would say that a Neptune coming on one's sun with such a strong sun like this, my advice to them would be prepare. Prepare to not be wanting to do anything besides floating where the gods and goddesses would like you to be
At the hot springs.
in oneness,
Yeah.
in deep union, yeah, water, but really not having to focus too much. And we haven't talked at all about your own personal life, but I would tell anyone this, to prepare oneself financially, to prepare oneself with logistics in their life so that they can relax through this Neptune transit that's coming up.
Mhm.
And
This
an
is
interesting, yes, please.
Neptune coming over the sun, I would imagine, is a dissolution of identity.
That's one way to put it. Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Exactly. Disillusion of identity. But it wouldn't be nothing to be it would be nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, in the
It would
shadow
just be
side,
that you wouldn't want to have to rely on your identity at that time,
yeah.
especially with your identity being so strong as it is, being so you're so you're so present, and that's such a part of how people experience you. I wouldn't want you to feel like you had to rely on an old identity for those few years. You would want that whole metamorphosis to be taking place, and you wouldn't want to have to rely on it.
Yeah. I can feel this already coming on. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then
Go ahead.
we also, but we have help. We have help on the way, which I wanted to share also. Another piece for those of you who are really into astrology, I always look to Saturn. Saturn right out of the gate. Saturn moves about 2.5 years through a sign, or about 2.5 years through a house. And he's really good at looking at boots on the ground, daily living. What does Mother Earth, what does manifestation ask of you? How are you going to work over these next couple of years? Where do you need to be applying yourself? And this is Saturn right here, and he's right behind Neptune. He's in your 8th house for a couple of years, definitely through the next year. I have to look at my exact through April 2025. So he's asking you in the 8th house to work with your finances, okay, to get amongst other things. There's also other parts of the 8th house, but thinking about what I would advise someone here with this Neptune transit coming up, 8th house has to deal with other, like, investments, real estate, taxes, other people's money, inheritances, windfalls,
Mhm.
having all of that in order. Do you see how it's interesting how these two outer planets are working together for you right now for the next year, saying, okay, Marcella, this would be a really good time to focus on cleaning this stuff up. And he always leaves a gift. He always leaves a gift if we roll up our sleeves and listen.
Yeah.
And then you can really relax. You would really be able to relax through this new metamorphosis that's coming. Yes.
Well,
So,
this is all very relevant. I am tomorrow is the last meeting of the current configuration of my Women, Food, and Forgiveness Academy, and I am converting it into a 12-month online course. And the idea here is that it's a course. It runs itself with a little flywheel nudge from me once in a while, but precisely so that I could slide into that Saturn. I didn't know that that Saturn Neptune conjunction was coming, but precisely so that I could slide into that.
mhm.
So, I'm 62 now, and it's like, okay, it's interesting. And that's a whole piece about aging. And of course, that's a lot of what I do on Substack. It's like my whole relationship to ambition has changed, and it has become like a much more internal ambition, like the ambition
Mm,
for God, if you will, the ambition for, the ambition to realize the fruits of this lifetime before I have to like exit and cross over into the next one. So
beautiful.
yeah, I love
That kind
this.
of goes along with the last thing I would like to say about your chart, because mostly wanted to share with your viewers and listeners the most instant type of work with one of these pictures that one can do. Where's your eye immediately going? What is most useful here for this individual or for the collective?
Mm.
Easy peasy. Doesn't have to be drawn out. So even just learning about what do those archetypes represent? Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, so forth. That could just make your life so much easier, as well as understanding what are each of the 12 houses about. Okay, so learning, it doesn't take too long. One can make flashcards of these little pictures, these little glyphs, and see, then putting it together. That's the best way to learn,
Mm.
as opposed to
Interesting.
struggling.
Yeah.
And then you have Saturn in that, see that blue line that goes all the way down to your 4th house of your moon and your Neptune here. Trining is the water sign here. So exactly what you just mentioned, that your deep internal spiritual life is where it's at for you. So this building, this structure is going to support you in that arena
Yeah.
where all things Scorpio, the depth wants to come in. your massive intuition. Well,
Yeah.
that's what I would see.
Yeah.
Moon conjunct Neptune in Scorpio in the 4th house.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I have an astrologer friend in California who said she's Mexican, and she said, Marcelita, you've done the work of like five spiritual PhDs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we
Okay.
can take it from here unless there's anything that you wanted to bring up before we move on from this
Um,
example.
no, no, it's just interesting to, it's kind of like looking at an old friend. Like I haven't looked at my chart in a really long time, but it's like, oh yeah, there it is. I know it quite well. It's beautiful.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, great. Okay. I also pulled up some other charts. I don't know how much we want to look at charts, but I also pulled up your
Oh yeah.
progress chart. I'll just say out loud that a progress chart, it's sort of like when you have a birth chart, your progress chart is like that birth chart opening up like a flower throughout your lifetime. It
Oh, I
continues
love
to
that.
evolve. And so when we look at the progress chart, I look at the progressed moon because the progressed moon moves signs every 2.5 years. Okay. And it shows us where our heart is at, where our soul is at. So I look at the progressed moon. I also look at if there are any changes going on in the progressed midheaven or ascendant rising sign or any of the personal planets, because those will really affect the tonality. I'll just pull it up really fast to just
Hmm.
give you a glimpse. It'll affect the tonality of you as an Aries Leo rising. You'll see what I mean here. So let's see, where are we at? Progressions. Okay. So here we see a very similar chart, but the green glyphs on the outer wheel are now progressions. They are not transits. So the first thing that we see is that Marcella's progressed moon is in the sign of Aquarius, the people. So even though her natal moon is in Scorpio, will always be Scorpio. She will always have that moon in Scorpio. Her progressed moon has been going through her 7th house in the sign of Aquarius for about 21 months. I think that is, yeah. And it's because the moon moves a degree, a progressed moon moves 1 degree every month. She's going to have that moon in Aquarius till the end of the year, and then it's going to shift into Pisces.
It moves a degree a year, is that
I'm
right?
sorry, did I say a moon a month, a degree a
Yeah,
month?
yeah,
Degree a month, sorry, thank you.
yeah.
So it's going to move into Pisces next year and also into that 8th house that we talked about
Oh,
earlier.
and so that's going to be happening at the similar time as the Sun Neptune.
As Saturn in the 8th. So
Yeah.
matters of 8th house are going to be very important for you. And they always have been, given the fact that you have this strong Scorpio energy, because the 8th house rules Scorpio. So not only are we looking at finances, although being a really practical person, I have Mercury in Capricorn, so I'm always like really practical right out of the gate. I want to see how I can truly help people on the ground. Of course, the first thing I think of with the 8th house is to help people realize they need to focus on their cleaning up their finances if they need to, or focusing on real estate or investments, or cleaning up debt or taxes. But we don't want to forget that the 8th house is all about death and rebirth. It is also about just mystical transformation, as well as sex and deep, deep, deep intimacy. So those might be other areas that are coming up. And I really was thinking about that with your emphasis on the 8th house. It's in Pisces, all these planets in your 8th house. So again, we have that spiritual life. I was thinking about the title of your work, Women, Food, and Forgiveness. Now, if that doesn't sound like a rebirth, emphasis, I don't know what does.
Yeah, yeah,
Forgiveness feels like an 8th house theme to me.
absolutely.
And I think that somehow I felt like grief was also a part of that.
Sure.
It's grief work.
Oh yeah. Well, that's that, the eighth house, the Scorpio principle, Pluto. I mean, this is what my experience of it is. It tears us all the way down to hell and rebuilds us all the way up to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and here, for those who are really astrology buffs, there's another piece of this whole eighth house equation, which is all these planets opposition Pluto in the second house. And this has been, I mean, this is a lifelong theme for me, my will versus your will. Your will, not mine, be done. I've taken on the brick wall, I've banged my head against the wall, I've tried to prevail, had that completely torn down, broken down, completely broken down. And from that breakdown came, I believe, the birth of the capacity, to whatever degree I have it now, to guide other women through that portal of transformation. That's that whole Pluto. I think about that one a lot, the Pluto Mars. I mean, Lord have
Mm-hmm.
mercy. I
Mm-hmm.
like, sometimes I say to people, I can't help it. I was born this way, like I
Yes.
can't help it. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
It's really deep. I have a very strong heart chakra feeling when you're talking. It makes me want to cry. So we're
Uh,
definitely in the truth realm. And if you're
yeah.
interested in working on some of those issues, woman, food, and forgiveness, I would say this is your person
I
right here.
yeah, I will say, I've been doing this work now for close to a decade, and the biggest result the women get from working with me is they say, I have finally learned to love and forgive myself.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a privilege. Like I mean, it's such a privilege. So
Thank you for
that,
your work.
that whole descent into hell, I mean, yeah. And then it becomes the greatest blessing, the greatest gift. And, I'll just put a plug in for this. There is nothing in terms of this, for me, in terms of
Yes.
spiritual growth and development, there is nothing that compares to working with other people.
Mm.
You know,
Wow.
I mean, I've been a Buddhist for nearly 40 years, and I've been in recovery for a long time, and I've done all those things, and those are wonderful things to do. But taking all of that and bringing it to another person or bringing it to a group of people and being able to facilitate that comparable level of transformation, my spiritual journey personally took off when I began to do that work, this work.
Hmm.
Yeah. And,
That's
and
really
and that's all the
awesome.
Pluto Mars. That's all like surrendering my will, surrendering to, like, Pluto's going to win. Pluto's in the smackdown between Pluto and Mars.
Hmm.
Pluto's the higher octave. Pluto's going to win. You know.
True, true.
Yeah.
And thank you. Yes, thank you for sharing all of that. Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. And I mean, there's so much to say around all of that. I also want to point out that your South Node is in Aquarius in the seventh house, which means you have a natural gift also of one-on-one working. You probably do one-on-one work,
I do,
right?
and I love it.
Tapping and so forth.
Yeah.
So that the Aquarius South Node, you came in with that. You came in with that.
Mm,
That was your I mean, you've had that from past lives. That's working with others. And you've been doing that a lot in the last couple of years as well. Your North Node is in the first house in Leo, which means that you also you need to be partly a star. I mean, you definitely are born to be a star here and to be
yeah.
seen,
Oh,
you know? And yeah, and so again, another progression here I would look at is the sun. Your progressed sun is in Gemini, so
yeah.
teaching, communication, and it moves 1 degree a year, and it's soon going into your 11th house. So the 11th house is teaching in groups,
Oh,
building.
that's it's
Mhm.
going into the 11th house of
Uh,
Cancer.
no, it's in Gemini. See here, can you see my mouse?
Oh yeah. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Gemini is my 11th and
Your
Cancer
progressed
my
sun.
12th.
So
That's
you
right.
will always be in Aries. You will always be in Aries, but your progressed sun, that progressed life force energy,
It's in
which
Gemini.
moves 1 degree a year. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did. Yeah, I got it. I was confusing the 11th and 12th houses.
That's fine, yeah. So it's going to be an even deeper emphasis on teaching, communication, speaking, podcasting, writing, and disseminating. The 11th house is disseminating to the people. And you also have your midheaven is how you express yourself. That's also in Gemini with Mercury in Gemini right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I just wanted to share that little glimpse of a progression with you and with folks to see how that's also a quick glance tool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
hmm And I think I'm at the risk of, may I share one last thing or is it
You
too
can share
much?
whatever you want. Just
Okay. All
go
right.
for it.
So this is the
This is a
composite chart.
free speech platform.
Free speech.
Yes.
Great. Okay. This is really fun. This is the composite chart, which as you know, I do because I've done that for you in the past. I see if can I shrink it a little bit more? How can I get it down the screen? Let's see. Let me see if I can, no, I don't know how to do it. Okay. Well, my point
You want
being, if you could just look at the top here, this is a composite chart. Now, a composite chart is when two people's charts come together.
mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is between you and me.
Oh, I like
And so it's a midpoint of all the points in our charts. And we have created a baby. And that baby is the two of us together, our relationship as friends, as colleagues. And this is what we're here to do together. This is Erin and Marcella. Now, immediately I looked at this to see if I should do this podcast today when you asked me, because it's in the middle of summer, there's a lot going on. Now, you can't maybe see it, but I look at the transits and the Saturn, maybe you can see it right up there.
it.
It's a little
Yep.
block.
That's it.
There's a Saturn tippy top conjunct the midheaven of our composite chart today. Exactly. And down here, down by the moon, we have Mercury conjunct the moon today, just
Oh.
like that. But primarily when I saw Saturn there, I was like, okay, you and I have something that we need to share with the world today.
Mm-hmm.
That's practical, that's important, and more than likely spiritual, being in Pisces. So I
Wow.
said, okay, yes, because I do the work of Saturn. You know, I find it to be really important work.
When
It's not
Saturn
fun to
calls you,
ignore Saturn.
you obey.
I do. I don't want to mess around with that. I mean, Pluto, you have no chance. You
Yeah.
got to, yeah, he's already done it.
Yeah. Right.
Saturn is a little bit more like you could slack, but you wouldn't feel good about it later, or it might bite you in the butt later or something like that. But if you say, okay, I'm willing, he's the karmic taskmaster. He's really about working within the Maya, working within the manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone super interested in astrology, composite charts, astro.com is really easy to pull up charts. As long as you have two people's data, you can go in and select a composite chart, and then you can see this whole relationship chart. And it's a separate entity. It's not Marcella, it's not Erin, it's the two of us together. And you can see that we have a ninth house sun here, which means we're going to do some sort of teaching that's more philosophical or spiritual here together. And that goes on for probably the course of our friendship.
Yeah.
However we show up, we're probably going to talk about spiritual things.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that sounds just about right. That is so beautiful. I love it. You know, I like the way you talk about archetypal astrology. And I think that's really interesting because in the academy, I built the whole academy curriculum around archetypes of feminine power. That's that Venus on the midheaven,
I
right?
noticed that too.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can say something about the archetypal energy and what that is, and how somebody listening to this who might be either, dabbling into astrology or just seeking a deeper wisdom relating to their lives in the context of this time that we're all collectively going through. What is that archetypal wisdom and how does it come into play?
Mhm. I would say it's really hard to I've had definitions of archetypes come through, and it's more of a knowingness. Some people say that archetypes, which is a word that was coined by Carl Jung, are wisdom streams or information streams. They're the power packet of that particular energy type or style or expression. And there's a sense that it's been here forever. It, it's
That's
always been here.
so is that the non-dual piece of it?
No, no, what I mean by that is it's sort of created along with everything else. Like we've always had death, we've always had rebirth, we've always had the feminine, we've always had the masculine.
Mm.
So these are principles that we all live, we all have on our planet and throughout the universe. And they're expressed in various ways. They could be expressed in a tree outside. You could see a tree and you could see that as the expression of the moon or of Saturn, however it's showing up. But for me, it's also it's like a force. It's like a force that can actually come through our own lives. And
Mm.
there's a debate whether or not we can wrestle with that or if we can't wrestle with it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
For example, a goddess, like you could say Lakshmi or Kali. A person might have a really strong energy expression of one of those deities in their persona or their personality or in their destiny. It might be coming through. Like you said, what did you say? You were born this way about that?
Mm-hmm.
So can you argue with that? Can you argue with an archetypal expression? Or
Mm.
is it just the way it is?
Yeah.
So a fierce type female can be
Oh,
really terrifying for if she doesn't embrace it.
yeah.
It can be frustrating. But if we see, oh, Kali is coming through me, I am her, I am a force of nature, I am her. Is there a problem with that? No. What creates the problem is the separation.
That's the ego identity. That's the small I.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And the
Yeah.
same thing with death, with Pluto, which is Shiva. What if we judged that? What if we judged it and we said, oh, that shouldn't be here?
And when there's judgment, there's fear, there's limitation. Yeah. Right. Right.
Definitely. And suffering, which is my whole shtick, is the end of suffering.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, really what it comes down to. So these planets, like they show up in our news and in our movies and our books and all of this, we can see these archetypal forces and we can dance with them or dance as them without feeling victimized by it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I like that. I like that. We can dance with them without feeling victimized by it. What I find working with archetypes is they enliven
Mm-hmm.
our perspective. So when I heard you talking about, yeah, the Uranus, Mars conjunction and dislodging the bullshit, I mean, literally it's this image of like impacted stool coming through a colon, like, boom, and then it's got to come out like, boom, out it goes. So, and that's exactly what happened in the collective last week. It was like all of a sudden it was like, wait, here's this, wait, here's that. Oh my gosh, now this is happening. And it's like, and so to have that archetypal perspective, it's like, well, yeah,
That's right.
okay, this is what is happening right now is
Correct.
exactly what is supposed to be happening. And there's nothing to freak out about. Just get your surfboard out. And what did I say? I was going to buy stock in popcorn, like just, like,
Right.
yeah, just like we're just going to watch the dance. We're going to watch the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Watch the movie.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah, it removes fear
It
to see
removes
it
fear. It
very
removes
clearly.
fear and it removes isolation. So
Mm,
I find for like when I work with women in the academy, one of the huge archetypes that I work with, the biggest one that when she comes out, everybody goes, oh my God. Oh yeah. And that is the rebel maiden. the rebel maiden, the teenager, the young, the feisty rebel maiden. She's a rebel. She says, you're not the boss of me. You know, don't tell me what to do. I'm a rebel without a clue. I'm a rebel without a cause. You know, I'm a rebel. And the rebel maiden shows up as the saboteur. So she's the rebel maiden is the one who pulls hard in the opposite direction of, like, we want to go over here with our food choices and with our self-care and with our realization and our path, but the rebel is pulling us back over here. So, okay, what is the path of relating to that rebel maiden? You can't fight her. So let's relate to her. What is her medicine? You know, she's the one who calls bullshit on the deception. You know,
Right.
when things are not authentic, she will not go along with them. So it's a call to authenticity.
And so I would put that straight into the realm of Aquarius.
Yeah, because she's like the innovator, or she's breaking the iconoclast, she's breaking the molds. She's
She's a rebel.
she's a rebel.
She's willing to be the outsider, and she's willing to be the shit disturber.
Yeah,
She's willing
and
to say the truth when it's very uncomfortable, Please go ahead.
well, and all with all of them, there's a light and a shadow. So,
Mm-hmm.
her wisdom is like she calls truth on the bullshit, but the other side can be just rebelling for the sake of rebelling and not really grounded,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or self-harming,
Mm-hmm.
or, like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then that's where we could talk about all of the archetypes of these planets and luminaries. So then we have our relationship to the moon there and the mothering aspect of
Yeah.
it.
That's
So
right.
what does Rebel Maiden need? What kind of mothering did she not get? Where is she needing to be seen? Or another thing that I work with a lot with Saturn, as I've been talking a lot about today, is the father archetype. And
Mm.
so what I find with women, especially, is that they have no contact and no integration with their inner papa. So
Oh,
it's constantly being projected. So it's one thing to focus on the relationship with the mother going south and all of that, but how much have they cultivated not their relationship with their biological father, but their own inner father? That is unsinkable. Unsinkable. It can take a long time to make contact with it, but when it's there, he's going to look out for her, no question. And he's also going to discipline the rebel maiden,
that's great. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
the other archetype of Pluto, which we've talked about, you talked about stools and colons and all of that. I mean, that's where the garbage heap just gets exposed. And we can see, and I'm sure you see it in your work all the time, you
Yeah.
know, how much we want to look away from all of the crap,
That's right.
you know? And
Yeah.
we have a big change coming up now with Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto and Aquarius. There's that rebel that you're talking about, but it's also this shadow side. Pluto will bring up shadow for sure. But I say go toward it.
Yes,
Look at
absolutely.
it entirely. Do not run from shadow. Look at it. Integrate it.
Yeah.
Can you face? Can you embrace? Can you accept that which disgusts you? That's
Mm.
so important.
Yeah. Walk toward your lion. Yeah. Go
Right.
toward it. Mm-hmm. Well,
Mhm.
that's interesting because that Pluto, like if I think about, so in the academy, we worked with like maiden, mother, queen, crone,
Mhm, mhm,
corresponding to the seasons, like the maiden in the spring, the mother in the summer, the queen in the fall, the crone in the winter. That Pluto is kind of like the hag aspect of the crone.
mhm,
Anything but this. No, 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 please. Anything but this. Anything but this. Right? Yeah.
mhm.
The old woman we don't want to see,
Right.
the reality of the aging and the decaying of our own bodies, you know, all of that. Walking toward the lion, walking toward the hag, walking toward, and it is interesting because doing this work, I notice I relate to elders. So, I mean, we're all becoming elders, but I relate so differently now. And it's like there's so much beauty. There's so much
Mhm.
beauty,
Yes.
you know, there's
Yes.
so much beauty. There's so much beauty where women can just light up like a rose in the springtime, like, hi,
Mhm.
hey, I'm in there, you know?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
been
sweet.
recently taking a swim fit class because I have an injury, so I'm taking, like, aqua aerobics, and they're all beautiful elders in there with me, and I have the best time, and they are so inspiring, these folks. I love them.
That's great.
Great women. And, I've been working a lot with Pluto in that regard, and this hag energy, you know, love it. Bring it on. I think we need to educate each other more and more and more so that it doesn't become just an outcast sideline, you
Yeah.
know? Let's elevate that wisdom.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yep. And
mhm.
let it begin here. Let it begin right here. Right here. So, Erin, where do we find you on Substack?
My name, Erin Reese,
Mm-hmm.
.substack.com.
And what are the sort of services that people can, how the gates by which they enter into your mandala? So we have your podcast, Truth and Consciousness, which is great. You do
Yeah.
these astrological, what do? You pull the charts, you look at the full moon, the new moon, you're looking at significant planetary
Mhm,
happenings, doing uncanny, phenomenal channeled readings. So cool. So great. So we have that. Then we have your writing, and
mhm.
you have a whole music page about like looking at Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon or whatever. So the music of our era, the music of time gone by there, but like cool, looking at like classic music from a very esoteric
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah, I think, well, first I will mention my books. I don't have them in front of me to show you, but
Okay.
I have 3 books. I've written a trilogy of memoirs about my travels in mostly in India and my spiritual rabbit holes and time with my teachers and so forth. So those are available on Amazon.
Well, tell us the
Um,
titles.
yes, The Adventures of Bindi Girl, Bindi Girl 2, and Truth Seeker. Truth Seeker is my favorite, but I think a lot of people really love Bindi Girl if they're interested in travel adventures, but Truth Seeker is really about this kind of Plutonian death process. It's a spiritual adventure of love, loss, and liberation. So that's the one that I love the most, actually.
Oh, sweet.
Um, so those are my 3 books, and also, I do offer satsang, usually fall, winter, spring, which is usually about twice a month. And those are spiritual talks with me on Sundays, in which we go very deep into Advaita non-dual teachings and wisdom, but from an embodied perspective. And um, I have a very small sangha that I am welcoming of new people if they feel drawn to those teachings, which are pointers to the end of suffering. So it's kind of a similarity over cross, it's like my husband calls Advaita Vedanta or non-duality, sort of like the Indian version of Zen.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds very Zen.
It is, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That was my intuition was right about that. Yeah. The Indian version of Zen. So it's a beautiful smorgasbord of offerings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
And I'm not doing a lot of personal readings at this moment, but if people contact me, they can usually nudge me into something,
Ah, okay, cool.
when the calling is there. But I'm mostly appreciative when people uh, listen to the podcast or read the Substack and participate in that Substack community because that keeps me going. I feel like that's kind of like we said, like doing our dharma. That's part of my dharma is to write and to inspire and to
Yeah.
share and to help guide us, offer this interpretation of this compass of where we're going or what is unfolding so that it can hopefully make us feel a little more relaxed, like we said, and make things a little bit smoother because as we all know, it's beyond crazy in the world. And it doesn't have to be crazy for us.
Mhm. I was going to ask you if you would leave us with one little pearl, one last pearl of wisdom. So I think that was just it. It's beyond crazy right now, but it doesn't have to be crazy for us. Yeah. And that's where our choice and our agency come in, which we
Mhm.
always have.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Erin. I
Thank you
bow my
so
head to your lotus feet, Bindi girl.
much. Thank you for your awesome work. It's
Yeah.
been great to spend time with you.
Oh, it's been great. Really, really fun. All
I
right.
look
More
forward to
soon.
seeing you again.
All right. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.